Effective immediately, Marcus Reyes is no longer part of Reyes Tooling and Design. We thank him for his years of service. Reyes, any comment before you go? I'm here, boss. Empty the whole floor. Understood. I'm on it. Nobody in that auditorium watching a single dad carry one cardboard box past 280 silent co-workers and out into the cold November wind knew the truth. This counterstrike had been moving in total silence for 10 months. The polished CEO smiling on that stage, the one the trade press called a phenomenon, had 5 hours left. By 6 o'clock, she would learn exactly what she had just lost and exactly who had been in control the whole time. She thought she had fired an aging consultant with a contractor badge. She had just fired the only man in the building who owned every share she was about to sell. Have you ever been mistaken for the smallest person in a room you built? Stay with me. In 5 hours, that mistake gets a price tag. His name is Marcus Reyes. He's 44 years old. And until 9 months ago, he believed one simple thing. If you build something quietly enough, the truth will always be louder than the people taking credit for it. He was wrong about the loud part. He was right about everything else. Let's go back to the morning it came apart, because it started like every other morning of his life. 5:35 in Pittsburgh. The sky the color of a wrench. Marcus stood in a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and coffee, flipping waffles, while down the hall his son Theo negotiated with his shark socks. Theo is 6. He believes 3 things with his whole heart. That the hammerhead is objectively the best shark, that waffles taste better shaped like a fin, and that his dad is just a quiet guy who fixes machines. 2 of those 3 things are true. That Friday, Marcus cut the waffle into a dorsal fin, laid out blueberries for teeth, and slid a folded note into the lunchbox. Same as every day, that one said, "Be brave. Be kind. Fins up, buddy." Theo can't read all the words yet. His teacher says he makes her read them to him twice every lunch like scripture. At 7:45, Marcus dropped him at first grade and watched him run for the doors, backpack bouncing, one sneaker velcroed crooked because matching is a rule and 6-year-olds are lawyers. Then he drove 25 minutes to a plant off Route 51 with his name over the entrance and a contractor badge in his pocket that said he barely belonged inside it. You need to understand how a man ends up in that position on purpose. Marcus's father was a tool and die man, 29 years at a shop near the river. Hands like cracked leather. He used to say, "The mill doesn't care what you tell it. It only cares what you do with your hands." Marcus was better than him at 20. And the old man said so out loud once, which in that house was a parade. 14 years ago, Marcus started Reyes Tooling and Design in a rented garage bay with a second-hand CNC lathe, a borrowed welder, and a stubborn friend named Sal, who worked the first month for nothing but tacos and faith. They machine parts that aren't allowed to fail. Orthopedic implants, aerospace fittings, pieces where a flaw thinner than a human hair gets somebody killed. Precision was the product. Quiet was the culture. 10 years in, the company had 280 employees, and a lobby wall with a photograph of that garage bay hanging by the door. Elena found it. She was the underwriter the bank sent to decide if the little shop deserved a bigger loan. She looked past the numbers at Marcus's scarred hands and approved it anyway. He married her 2 years later. She used to fall asleep on his shoulder with spreadsheets still open. When Theo was born, she cried about his tiny fingernails. Perfect little machined parts, she said. Nobody made Marcus laugh like that woman. When Theo was 1, she got sick. The disease doesn't get a name here. It doesn't deserve the syllables. She fought for 14 months, and then it was just Marcus, a baby monitor, and a company that suddenly meant a lot less than everyone assumed it did. Here's the math he did at her funeral. A company can survive without your face. A 1-year-old cannot. So Marcus did something his lawyer called eccentric, and his accountant called insane. He stepped down as CEO. He moved every share he controlled, 61% of Reyes Tooling, into a family trust carrying his wife's and son's initials, the T. Reyes Trust. On paper, the majority owner of the company stopped being a man and became a name in a filing cabinet in Harrisburg. Sole trustee, sole signature, his. But you'd need a subpoena to find that out. Nobody looked. Then he hired his own replacement, Renata Cole, Ivy League polish, a headhunter's crown jewel, a smile built for trade magazine covers and quarterly calls. Marcus hired her because she was everything he wasn't. Camera-ready, fluent in the language of capital. The deal in his head was simple. She runs the boardroom. He keeps the machines honest as a consultant. And he's in the school pickup line by 3:20. New hires called him Marcus from the floor. He liked it that way. The only person who still remembered was Loretta Kim, the controller, 63 years old, reading glasses on a beaded chain, keeper of the books since the garage. She still called him boss when nobody was listening. For 3 years, Marcus corrected her every time. 9 months ago, he stopped correcting her. Because the thing about handing someone your spotlight is this: some people hold it for you. Some people start believing they built the sun. People ask how a man loses his own company without noticing. The honest answer is he does notice. He just notices in thousandths of an inch. In Marcus's trade, there's a word for that: drift. A machine can drift out of tolerance so slowly that every single day looks normal, and the part it finally ruins looks like an accident. It never was. Renata's first year, give her credit, was good. Revenue up, new contracts, press mentions twice a month. Marcus told himself the noise was the point. He'd hired a spotlight, and spotlights get worn. The drift started in year 2. It started with the walls. A rebrand, she called it. Fresh paint, glass partitions, a heritage wall redesign in the lobby. When the contractors finished, the photograph of the garage bay, the one with Sal leaning on a borrowed welder and Marcus squinting into the sun like an idiot, was gone. Marcus found it 3 weeks later in a storage closet, face down in a box marked archive. He stood there holding it for a long time. Then he put it back in the box. He told himself, a picture is not a company. Then it was the story. One Tuesday, Marcus stopped for gas near the plant and saw her face on the rack by the register. Steel City executive, glossy as a showroom hood, the woman who built Reyes Tooling. He read the article standing next to the wiper fluid. 9 pages. His name appeared 0 times. Sal's name appeared 0 times. The garage had become humble local roots. Marcus paid for his coffee, drove to work, and said nothing. By year 3, the new hire orientation video said the company was founded by a small local team and transformed by visionary leadership. Marcus watched 23-year-olds nod along to it. One of them, a sweet kid in quality control, actually explained the company's history to its own founder in the break room. Renata built this place from nothing. She's incredible. Marcus refilled his coffee and agreed she was something. Do you want to know why he stayed quiet? Part of it was the plan. Quiet was the deal he'd made with himself at a funeral. But part of it, let's be straight, was pride dressed up as patience. Marcus didn't need credit. He needed the pickup line by 3:20. That math still worked. Right up until the Thursday it didn't. Quarterly operations review, 11 people, 1 long table. Renata, at the head in a suit the color of chalk. Her pen was a heavy black lacquer thing she clicked when she wanted the room's attention, and the room had learned that sound like a dinner bell. Agenda item 5 was a supplier switch on the titanium alloy used in the implant line. New vendor, 20% savings, missing 2 fatigue certifications. Marcus flagged it politely, the way you flag a gas leak. She let him finish. Then she smiled the smile the trade press loved, looked around the table and said, for those who haven't met him, Marcus is a consultant. He consults on machines. A pause timed like a comedian's. Marcus, sweetheart, the certifications are a formality. This is why legacy overhead is a line item I keep having to defend. Legacy overhead. The room did that thing rooms do. A few people laughed because she was watching them laugh. A few stared at their notepads. Marcus looked at her for a moment and saw something he hadn't let himself see before. She wasn't cutting costs. She was performing an execution, and he was the prop. He didn't argue. A man who has spent his whole life on shop floors knows you don't win a fight with a spinning blade by yelling at it. You cut the power. So he said, noted, and wrote 1 word on his legal pad. The word was drift. After the meeting, a project manager caught up to him by the elevators. The man checked the hallway both ways like someone crossing traffic and whispered that he was sorry about all that. That's what fear smells like in a company. Apologies delivered like contraband. Marcus told him he had nothing to be sorry for. Then he went down to the floor and quietly flagged every lot from the new titanium supplier for double inspection under his own authorization code. If she wanted to gamble with money, fine. Nobody gambles with a hip replacement. That night, he stayed late. Empty floor, one desk lamp, a stack of vendor invoices, and a red pen. Coffee going cold beside him. If she wanted to call him overhead, overhead reads everything. It took 5 hours to find it. A vendor called Vantage Point Advisors. Strategic consulting, $38,000 a month. Invoices as vague as horoscopes. Market positioning support, stakeholder alignment, no deliverables, no work product, no contact name anyone had ever heard. The billing had started small 2 years back and grown like a tumor. Total so far, $980,000, and the dates told their own story. Every invoice spiked in the weeks before a board meeting, like somebody topping off a war chest right before the generals sat down. Marcus traced the address through 2 LLC filings, the way you trace a bad wire through a wall. The trail ended at a registered agent, and behind the agent, a condo in Sewickley. He knew the name on the deed before he finished typing it. Derek Cole, Renata's younger brother, the man who'd toasted family at the company holiday party with Marcus's champagne in his hand. Marcus sat in that empty office and felt something worth describing carefully because you've probably felt it too. Not rage. 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 This was quieter and heavier, like watching a slow leak in a roof you framed with your own hands. Rage makes a man stupid. This thing made him precise. Monday morning, he asked Loretta to stay after the payroll run. He closed the door. He said, "I need you to start keeping records. Real timesheets, real invoices, everything dated, backed up twice, nowhere near the company servers." Loretta looked at him over those reading glasses for a long second. She didn't ask what he'd found. She asked, "How far back do you want me to go?" "As far as it takes. What they built over the next months wasn't revenge. Be clear about that because it matters for what comes later. It was documentation. A green notebook that never touched a network. Certified copies. A fireproof box in a storage unit off Banksville Road, rented under his late mother's maiden name. Every inflated invoice cross-referenced against real vendor pricing. Every backup logged twice. And while they worked, the drift kept drifting, almost like the building could smell what Marcus knew. His badge died on a Tuesday. Just stopped working at the turnstile. Red light. That little refusal beep while a line formed behind him. Ernesto at the security desk, a man who'd known Marcus since the garage bay, went gray with embarrassment as he printed a visitor sticker, visitor, in blocked letters, on the shirt of the man who built the place. "Clerical error," said the email. The error took 11 days to fix. Then the apprenticeship program went away. Marcus had started it in year 4 and quietly named it for his father, the tool and die man. 6 kids a year from trade schools, paid, mentored, hired. Renata relaunched it at a press event as the Cole Fellows. New logo, same kids, her name where the old machinists used to be. Marcus watched the ribbon cutting from the back and kept his face like a poured slab. Then came Investor Day. Lights down, music up. Slide 32 of her keynote was Marcus's vibration-dampening fixture. His design, his patent, the one with his name on it in a frame in his basement. On the screen it said, "Innovation delivered," over her silhouette. The room applauded. She bowed her head, humble as a queen at her own coronation. Marcus clapped too. The mill doesn't care what you tell it. It cares what you do with your hands. But here's the moment that turned a leak into a war. It came from Loretta 3 weeks later on a Sunday by burner text, because by then they'd stopped trusting the building. Someone in the CEO's office had been pulling documents. Not money documents. Ownership documents. The full capitalization table, every version back to founding. Filings about the T.E. Reyes Trust. 2 formal requests to the law firm in Harrisburg, both declined. And for exactly 35 minutes that Friday misfiled on a shared drive before someone yanked it back, a banker's deck stamped confidential. Loretta got screenshots of every page. The deck had a name. Project Halcyon. Marcus read it at his kitchen table after Theo was asleep, and his hands went cold at page 7. Ashcroft Capital, a private equity firm out of Chicago, in quiet talks to acquire the dormant estate stake, 61% of Reyes Tooling. The deck described the seller as a passive family trust managed by disinterested trustees, likely a motivated seller at the right discount. There was even a chart projecting how cheap the stake could get if margins kept sliding. Margins. She was bleeding herself $28,000 at a time. She had found the trust. She'd looked straight at a dead woman's initials and a 6-year-old's inheritance, and she'd read them as an abandoned safe nobody had the combination to. She wasn't skimming anymore. She was selling the whole machine, and she thought the owner was a ghost. She was half right. There was a ghost in that building. It just wasn't Elena. It was Marcus Reyes, and ghosts see everything. The next 10 months of Marcus's life looked boring from the outside. That was the design. Monday through Friday he was Marcus from the floor, the quiet consultant with the visitor-grade badge, nodding in hallways, fixing fixtures, eating lunch alone by the loading dock. Nights and weekends, he was something else. He and Loretta built a case the way you build an implant. Slowly to spec, with documentation for every cut. The green notebook filled up, real vendor quotes laid against Vantage Point's invoices, line by line, showing the padding in black and red. Purchase orders approved out of sequence. The warehouse lease the company paid on a building that, as far as county records could tell, was a gravel lot. And then the emails, deleted but not gone, because nothing is ever gone if the backup tapes were set up by a man who doesn't trust software. Marcus had built those retention systems himself, back when he signed the checks. One thread between Renata and Derek, 7 months old, ended with a sentence Marcus must have read 50 times. Keep it quiet until the trust stake clears. After that, none of it matters. None of it matters. Hold that sentence. We'll come back to it. He hired Nora Castellan that same week. She's the attorney in Harrisburg who administers the filings for the T. Reyes Trust, a calm, gray-eyed woman who bills in 6-minute increments and has never once raised her voice in Marcus's presence. He told her everything. She listened the way surgeons listen, then said 2 things. First, that Pennsylvania allows recording with the consent of at least one party to the conversation, so Marcus could lawfully record any conversation he was part of. Second, that he should buy a very good recorder. He bought 2. One lived in his jacket pocket. The other lived in his truck, in case the day ever came when the jacket didn't make it out of the building. Then came the Thursday that still wakes him up some nights. Nora called his cell at 4 in the afternoon. Her voice was flat in the way that means a lawyer is being careful. She said, "Marcus, I need you to tell me if you signed a delegation of voting authority in February 3 years ago." Marcus stood very still in his kitchen. "I've never signed a delegation." "Then someone signed it for you," she said. "It arrived by courier today, backdated, notarized by a notary whose commission had expired. It names the company's chief executive as authorized proxy for the trust's shares, and it carries your signature. Not a forgery scrawled by hand, a perfect one, because it came from a stamp. Back when Marcus was still CEO, the company ordered a signature stamp for high-volume purchasing paperwork. Standard thing. Thousands of companies have one. His had been sitting in the executive office safe for 4 years, in a drawer he no longer had a key to, 2 feet from where Renata Cole hung her chalk-colored blazers. Forgery is not a small word. It is not a misunderstanding you talk through over dinner. It is a decision somebody makes deliberately, believing the other person will never look closely enough to catch it. She had looked at a dead wife's initials on a trust, decided the man behind them was too small to check, and pressed his own name onto paper like it was a tool she'd found lying around her office. That night, Marcus drove out along the river, parked facing the lights smeared on the black water, a barge horn somewhere downstream. He thought about Elena's laptop, still in the closet because he couldn't donate it. He thought about his father's hands, and here is something he never told anyone. Not Loretta, not Nora, not even Elena when she was alive. 6 years ago, the company hit a wall. The customer went bankrupt, owing $1.6 million, and payroll was 8 days from bouncing for 90 families. Marcus didn't call a bank. Banks take weeks. He sold his father's machines. The lathe, the mill, the tools the old man had oiled every Sunday of Marcus's childhood, to a collector in Erie. Then he took a second mortgage on his house. The house Elena picked, the house Theo sleeps in now. He wired all of it into the company through a bridge account and told everyone they'd landed an early payment. Payroll cleared. Nobody ever knew. The collector sent a photo of the lathe afterward, polished like a museum piece under showroom lights. Marcus couldn't make himself look at it twice. You do things like that quietly because you don't want the people you protect to feel the weight. That's what he told himself. Sitting by that river, he finally heard the other half of the truth. If nobody ever sees you carry the load, somebody will eventually decide you never carried anything at all. Renata said the quiet part out loud a month later at the company's 14th anniversary gala downtown. String quartet and champagne Marcus was paying for in a very real sense. She found him by the bar, floor-length charcoal gown, hair like a shampoo commercial. That trade press smile at full wattage. She was beautiful the way a blade is beautiful. And she knew both facts. She touched her glass to his and said, in a voice as warm as bathwater, "I want you to know I don't hate you, Marcus. Companies like this get built by men like you and run by people like me. You were never the brains here, sweetheart. You were the muscle. We photographed well." The recorder in Marcus's breast pocket was running. Pennsylvania is a one-party consent state. He looked at her for a moment. The quartet played. Somewhere behind her, Derek was laughing with two board members, telling a story with his hands, and the last soft thing in Marcus Reyes closed up shop. "That's a hell of a toast," he said, and he raised his glass and walked away. She thought she'd won the exchange. People like her always count silence as surrender. Here's what she was actually doing while the quartet played, bleeding the patient to buy it cheaper. The Vantage Point invoices had doubled. 2 contracts got repriced into the red on purpose. And in October, a restructuring memo leaked onto the shop floor with 52 names penciled for layoff. Marcus read the list in the break room with his coffee going cold. Sal's name was 9th, the welder who worked a month for tacos, whose daughter is at Penn State on the tuition program Marcus started. That list was Renata lowering the company's price tag with a red pen, 52 families at a time. That's when Marcus stopped being a man gathering evidence and became a man choosing a date. Loretta found the date for him, a calendar invite forwarded through 3 assistants. Project Halcyon signing ceremony. Friday, 5 p.m. Top floor boardroom. Ashcroft Capital was flying in. The forged delegation would let Renata vote the trust's shares in favor. Wire transfers queued for Monday. After that, none of it matters. Now you know what that sentence meant. Once the sale closed and the money crossed state lines, unwinding it would take years. Marcus might not win. So Nora prepared the paperwork through 2 sleepless nights. Revocations, certifications, a criminal referral packet with the green notebook scanned cover to cover. Everything dated, sealed, ready to fire. The plan was to serve it all Friday morning, quiet and surgical, before the ceremony. Renata changed the schedule. Friday morning she called an all-hands town hall. Every employee, every sight on the live stream, wind rattling the windows, the auditorium smelling like wet coats and burnt coffee. She stood on stage in chalk gray and pearls and announced a transformational partnership with Ashcroft Capital. Applause, beautiful and thin. And then, with the cameras rolling, she looked down at her cards and smiled like a woman opening a gift she'd wrapped herself. And as we turn this page, some legacy relationships conclude. Effective immediately, Marcus Reyes is no longer part of Reyes Tooling at Design. We thank him for his years of service. 280 heads turned. The camera found Marcus against the back wall, between a forklift trophy case and a fire extinguisher. Security was already moving. 2 guys he'd trained on evacuation drills, so ashamed they couldn't look up from the floor tiles. Somebody's phone was streaming, and a young reporter from the company channel actually pushed a microphone toward him and asked if he had any comment on his way out. Understand this about that moment. Marcus wasn't crying. He wasn't shouting. His heart rate barely moved. And that wasn't toughness. It was arithmetic. She had just fired him in front of every witness in the company on camera, 5 hours before she needed nobody looking at her. She had also just handed him the cleanest stage a Counter-Strike ever gets. On his way out, he stopped at the storage closet and took one thing: a photograph, face down in a box marked archive. Sal, a borrowed welder, a garage bay, the sun. Then he stood under the awning, wind cutting sideways, took out his phone, and called Loretta. She picked up on the second ring, And through the glass he watched Renata up on her stage, shaking hands with a man from Chicago. "Empty the whole floor," he said. A pause. Not surprise. The quiet of a woman who had been waiting 10 months to hear exactly those 5 words. "Understood," Loretta said. "I'm on it." He hung up, called his neighbor Mrs. Iannelli next door, and asked her to grab Theo from school and start the waffles without him, because Friday is waffle night and some contracts don't get broken. Then he looked at his watch. 11:05. The signing ceremony was at 5. 5 hours. 10 months. 1 stamp with his name on it. Time to go collect his company. 1 or 2. No in between. Marcus stayed silent for 10 months while a stamp of his signature rented out his name. Comment 1 if that patience was wisdom. Comment 2 if it let her go too far. Lock your answer. The next 5 hours decide who's right. At 4:40 that afternoon, the top-floor boardroom looked like a magazine spread. Wind streaking the glass wall over the rail yards below, Kettering nobody touched. Ashcroft Capital on one side of the table, 3 lawyers deep, fountain pens lined up like surgical tools. Renata at the head, chalk grey suit, pearls the black lacquer pen. Derek lounged 2 seats down, tie loosened, wearing the confidence of a man who believed the hard part was over. The signature pages sat in the middle of the table in little flagged stacks. 61% of Marcus Reyes's life, dressed up in tabs that said "Sign here." Marcus rode the elevator, watching the floors climb, wearing the same wind-chapped jacket she'd fired him in. Nora Castellan stood on his left with a litigation case. Loretta stood on his right, holding a thin folder and a flash drive, reading glasses pushed up in her hair like she meant business. The doors opened. The 2 security guards from that morning were posted at the boardroom entrance. The taller one looked at Marcus, looked at Nora, and stepped aside like a man grateful for the excuse. They walked in mid-sentence. Renata's sentence. It died in the air. For 1 full second, nobody moved. Then the black lacquer pen clicked twice. "Marcus." Her voice went for board and almost made it. "You can't be in this building. You were separated this morning. Gentlemen, I apologize. This is an ex-contractor with hurt feelings." Security. Neither guard moved. Loyalty or curiosity. Either one did the job. Nora set her case on the table, unhurried as always. "Good afternoon. Nora Castellan, counsel for the T. Reyes Trust. Here's the detail Marcus will remember until he's old." Renata relaxed. She actually smiled and gestured at an empty chair, because in her version of the world, the trust's lawyer showing up meant the seller had come to close. She pulled out the chair herself. "Wonderful. We were told the trustees preferred to sign remotely." "There are no trustees," Nora said. "There is one trustee. She let that hang 1 beat. Before we address that, a housekeeping question for the record. Ms. Cole, this transaction relies on a delegation of voting authority executed in February 3 years ago. Who signed it?" Lawyers can smell weather changing before anyone else in the room. "The trustee of record signed it," Renata said. "It's in the data room. Certified. Certified by a notary whose commission expired 16 months before the date on the page," Nora said, laying a single sheet down like a card she'd held all night. "Which is difficult, and signed with a signature stamp stored in this building's executive safe. Which is worse, the trust has never delegated anything to anyone. I know that with unusual confidence, because the sole trustee is standing to my left." Every head in the room rotated to Marcus, the chapped jacket consultant, the legacy overhead, the muscle. "Marcus Reyes," Nora said, "sole trustee of the T. Reyes Trust, sole signatory on its shares, legal guardian of its beneficiary, owner, through the trust, of 61% of Reyes Tooling and Design. The stake you gentlemen flew in to purchase this afternoon belongs to the man Ms. Cole had escorted off the property at 11 o'clock this morning on your live stream." Silence has a weight. Marcus had read that in the green notebook months earlier, in his own handwriting, and now he finally got to feel it from the good side of the table. Renata laughed. One short note, the kind that's supposed to invite the room to laugh along. The room declined. "That's absurd. The trust is Elena's estate. It's managed by attorneys. Marcus was, an engineering consultant. He fixes machines. She looked at the Ashcroft partners, and her polish cracked right down the middle. He's the muscle. That's all he's ever been. Ask anyone. She turned on Nora. Your firm refused to name the trustee twice. A stake nobody claims is a stake nobody's watching. Any buyer would assume. Assumptions aren't due diligence, Ms. Cole, Nora said. They're confessions with better posture. Play it, Marcus said quietly. Loretta plugged the flash drive into the room console, and Renata Cole's own voice filled her own boardroom, warm as bath water, over her own speakers. You were never the brains here, sweetheart. You were the muscle. We photographed well. Her face went the color of her suit. You're right about one thing, Marcus said, his voice level, because 10 months buys a man level. I am the muscle. This morning, you fired the muscle in front of 280 people. This afternoon, the muscle owns every share in this room. The Ashcroft partner closed his leather portfolio. It made a small click, and that click was the loudest sound of the day. A deal dying doesn't sound like thunder. It sounds like a folder closing. Ms. Cole, he said, standing, buttoning his jacket. Ashcroft was presented a clean cellar and clean books. We appear to have neither. We're withdrawing. Our counsel will follow up regarding representations made to our fund. His eyes flicked to the forged delegation, then to her. Personally, mate. Nora slid one last envelope down the table. Renata stopped it with 2 fingers like it might bite. Notice of an emergency session of the board of directors. 7 o'clock tonight. The trust holding 61% has already voted its shares. You are suspended as chief executive, effective immediately, pending review of the items in that envelope. Effective immediately. Marcus didn't choose those words for her. She'd taught the whole building the phrase that morning, and he has always believed in using proven tooling. He picked up one of the flagged signature pages, looked at the tab that said sign here, and set it back down. Nothing's for sale, he said. Meetings at 7. Bring the pen. The board convened at 7 in the same room, and it smelled like cold coffee and consequences. Nora walked the directors through it without raising her voice once. The Vantage Point invoices against real market pricing, 4 million skimmed. The phantom warehouse lease. The repriced contracts. The recovered emails, including the one that said none of it matters. The delegation with a dead notary seal and a stolen stamp of Marcus's signature. Then the recording played once, all the way through, while Renata studied the tabletop and the directors studied her. She tried twice. The first time was polish. This is a coordinated misreading of routine transactions, and I'd welcome an independent review. Nobody blinked. Accountants don't misread a gravel lot pretending to be a warehouse. The second time was quieter, and it was aimed at Marcus. Marcus, we can fix this quietly. There's a version of tonight that doesn't embarrass anyone. We're better than a spectacle. Marcus thought about the auditorium that morning. The cameras she'd ordered, the microphone pushed at his face on a live stream she'd staged for 280 of his people and every site in the company. You had 10 months to fix it quietly, he said. You spent them renting a stamp of my name. You chose the spectacle this morning. I'm just honoring your production schedule. The vote took 8 minutes by Marcus's watch. 8 minutes to unwind 4 years of borrowed light. Removal for cause. Unanimous, with one abstention from a director who'd golfed with her too often to meet anyone's eyes. The forged delegation went to outside counsel with a referral packet. Her corporate cards died while she was still in the chair. And Loretta had not been idle since 11:10 that morning. By the time the vote closed, every Cole hire in the building had been terminated with documented cause. The procurement director who'd waved Vantage Point's invoices through. The comms chief who'd scrubbed the garage bay out of the orientation video. The chief brand officer with Marcus's old parking spot. 5 people, 5 files, 5 clean letters. Empty the whole floor isn't rage. When somebody has spent 10 months making sure every single letter would survive a wrongful termination suit, it's housekeeping. Derek never made it to the meeting. He'd left for the airport when the Ashcroft folder clicked shut, and his badge died at the turnstile on the way out. Clerical errors move fast when the paperwork is honest. Renata left the building at 8:50. Marcus didn't gloat at the door. He didn't need to, and he didn't want to. He watched from the mezzanine as she crossed the lobby with a single white box. heels ticking on the stone like a slowing metronome. She stopped for a second at the empty stretch of wall where the heritage display used to be, where the garage bay photograph was already back on its hook, because Marcus had asked Ernesto to rehang it that afternoon, first thing, before the board, before anything. Sal, a borrowed welder, the son. Her hand tightened around that black lacquer pen until her knuckles went white. Not the grip of a woman who'd lost a job. The grip of a woman holding the last object that still believed she was in charge. Then she walked out into the wind and the doors sighed shut. And that was that. Here's what Marcus actually felt, and it's the part the cameras never get. Not triumph. Tiredness. The specific tiredness of setting down something heavy you've carried so long your body forgot it was carrying it. He stood on that mezzanine while the cleaning crew buffed the lobby, and he let out a breath he'd been holding since a Thursday 10 months before. Then he looked at his watch and left before the directors finished their handshakes, because it was Friday, and Friday has a contract on it. He was home by 9:15. The house smelled like cinnamon. Mrs. Iannelli had left a note on the counter in schoolteacher cursive. He ate 4. He negotiated for 5. Theo was on the couch in shark pajamas, hair still damp from his bath, holding the Hammerhead book like a briefcase. "Dad, you're late for waffle night." "I know, buddy. Something ran long at work." "Did you have a good day at work?" Marcus sat down next to him. His son, 6 years old, warm as a furnace, smelling like shampoo, the owner of 61% of a precision machining company, and 0% of a single worry in this world. That was the whole point. That had always been the whole point. "Best one in a while," Marcus said. Mensat said. "Fins up," Theo said. And they read about the Hammerhead, and outside the wind finally settled. 5 hours. That's what the papers would eventually say it took. They were off by 10 months. But headlines were never built for men like Marcus Reyes. Justice, real justice, doesn't arrive like a movie. There's no gavel echoing in a marble hall while music swells. It arrives like machining, pass after pass, each one taking off a little more material, until what's left is the true shape of what somebody did. The independent forensic audit took 8 weeks. 2 accountants from an outside firm lived in the conference room with a coffee maker and no sense of humor. And when they were done, the number had grown teeth. 1 POS, 9 million routed through Vantage Point, and 2 smaller shells. A phantom lease, contracts repriced below cost to bruise the valuation before the sale. And the centerpiece, framed in exhibit tabs now instead of investor slides, 1 backdated delegation of voting authority, 1 expired notary, 1 signature stamp that had left the executive safe and found its way onto paper it had no business touching. Nora's referral packet went to the U.S. Attorney's office before Thanksgiving. Wire fraud crosses state lines the moment the money does. And this money had commuted. Derek went first. They met him at the airport 3 weeks later, boarding a one-way flight to Scottsdale with a laptop he really should have wiped. He was Derek about it. Cooperative within the hour, naming his sister by dinner, negotiating like the consultant he'd always pretended to be. His plea came fast. Restitution, forfeiture of the Suickley condo, a federal sentence measured in months instead of years, purchased with testimony. Renata held out longer. Her lawyers were excellent, and for 2 months they produced paper, the way the plant produces brackets. But recordings are stubborn things, and Pennsylvania allows one-party consent. And the woman on that recording had explained her whole philosophy in her own voice at her own gala. When the notary folded, and the paralegal who'd fetched the stamp described the drawer, the safe, and the date the paper stopped, she took a plea in the spring. Wire fraud, and 1 count tied to the forged instrument. Full restitution, paid in part by the sale of a lake house Marcus had apparently helped buy without knowing it. A permanent bar from serving as an officer or director of any public company. 26 months in a federal facility, followed by supervised release. The judge, a gray-haired woman with a machinist's patience, said something at sentencing that Marcus wrote down on an index card. The defendant did not steal because she lacked money. She stole because she believed the man she was stealing from lacked the standing to object. Standing. Lawyers use that word one way. Marcus uses it another. Both fit. The trade press flipped, because trade press does. Steel City Executive, the same one from the gas station rack, ran a new cover in April. Marcus's photograph this time, taken in front of the garage bay wall in his actual work jacket because he declined their stylist. The headline said, "The founder they erased." He didn't frame it. 9 pages, and the only sentence he gave them was this: "I built a company quietly, and quiet got mistaken for absent." That's the whole story. Actually, that's not quite true. He gave 2 sentences, but the second one went to somebody else. The young reporter from the company channel, the one who'd pushed a microphone at him on the worst morning of the whole affair, asked if he'd finally answer her question. "Any comment, Mr. Reyes?" He told her yes. Never apologize for asking the question. It was the only honest part of that broadcast. She runs the communications department now. The orientation video got reshot in a week. It opens with the garage bay photo, and it names Sal. Inside the plant, repair looked like paperwork too, just the good kind. The 52-name layoff list went through the shredder publicly in the break room, with coffee and donuts. Nobody got laid off. The titanium went back to the certified supplier, and the 2 quality supervisors who'd been quietly demoted for asking questions got their titles back, with back pay calculated to the dollar by Loretta, who cried once, briefly, at her desk, and then denied it. Loretta became chief financial officer, which mostly meant the title caught up to the truth. Walt Greer, the plant manager of 10 years, a man who says maybe 30 words a day and every one of them load-bearing, became president. People asked why Marcus didn't take the CEO chair back. He told the board the truth. "The company needs a full-time chief executive. Theo has a full-time father. Those are both real jobs, and I know which one I'm irreplaceable at." He kept the chairman's seat, his toolbox, and the school pickup line at 320. The apprenticeship program got its name back, his father's name stitched on 6 new sets of coveralls. First day of the new class, Marcus stood in the back and watched an 18-year-old kid from a trade school in Youngstown Square up a block of aluminum like it owed her money, and he thought about his old man's thermos, and he had to go stand in the hallway for a minute. Some inheritances you rebuild. Some rebuild you. One Saturday in May, Marcus drove down to Erie alone. The collector still had the lathe front of the showroom roped off, polished like a war memorial. The man recognized Marcus before he said his name, which meant he'd read the magazine. Marcus asked what it would take. The collector looked at him a long moment, then said, "It was never really for sale. I was holding it." Marcus paid exactly what the man had paid him 6 years earlier. Not $1 more, because that's what was asked. The lathe sits in the lobby now, under the garage bay photograph, with a small brass plate. Every company is built by somebody's hands. Next to the photo of the garage hangs one more frame. Elena at her desk, underwriting a little machine shop the day she decided a man's scarred hands were collateral. And Renata. One true thing about her, because hating people is heavy, and Marcus already carries a 6-year-old and a company. During the civil depositions, he learned her mother spent almost 30 years as a legal secretary downtown, typing other people's names onto work she'd half-built, invisible at every holiday party. Renata grew up watching that and swore it would never be her. Somewhere along the way, being seen stopped being a shield and became the whole religion. Credit wasn't vanity to her. It was oxygen. That doesn't excuse a stamp of another man's name on a forged page. Nothing excuses that. But it let Marcus set the anger down. And setting things down, it turns out, is a skill a man can get good at. The last piece of paper in this part of the story is small, a cashier's check. Restitution, first installment. Loretta deposited it on a Tuesday and printed the confirmation for the files. Marcus put it in the green notebook on the last page and closed the notebook. He hasn't opened it since. 3 months later, on a July Saturday morning, the Reyes kitchen table was covered in newspaper, and a birdhouse was drying in the middle of it, painted a blue so loud the birds may file a complaint. Theo did the painting. Marcus did the cutting. Theo did the sanding. Small block, small hands, tongue out sideways in concentration. Exactly how his grandfather looked at a lathe. They measured twice. They always measure twice. When you're 6, that rule is about birdhouses. Later, it's about everything. Syrup on his chin, plain circle waffles, because Saturday is freestyle. Halfway through, holding the little perch in place, Theo looked up with that ambush timing kids have. "Dad, Mrs. Iannelli says your name is on the wall at your work. Is it really? It is, buddy, because you made the whole company. Theo held the perch steady, very serious. Because a lot of people made it, Marcus said. Grandpa's hands, Mom's brain, Sal's welding, Miss Loretta's math. My job was to keep it safe, like you're doing right now. The boy nodded, satisfied, the way you nod at 6 when the world checks out. Fins up, he said to the birdhouse. That was the whole ward debriefed at his level. Somebody tried to take the thing they keep safe. They kept it safe. Pass the syrup. People ask if Marcus regrets the 10 months. Not the outcome, the silence. Whether he should have stood up in that first meeting, played the hero scene, flipped the table. It's a fair question, because we're raised on stories where loud is how you know somebody's strong. But here's what Marcus learned from his father, from a green notebook from the worst Friday and best Friday of his life, which turned out to be the same Friday. Loud is a performance. Documentation is a language. And the people who dismiss you are fluent in only one of them. She called him the muscle. She wasn't wrong. She just never read the fine print on the word. Muscle is what holds a thing up. Muscle is what carries the weight when nobody's watching. Muscle, given 10 patient months, is what walks into a boardroom at 4:40 on a Friday and sets the whole building back on its foundation without raising its voice once. So here's the index card from this story, the one worth taping beside your coffee maker. If somebody at work, in your family, in your life ever tells you that you're just the muscle, just the help, just the quiet one, don't argue with them that day. Don't perform for the room they control. Go home. Write down what they said, the date, and what you actually built. Read it back in the morning out loud. If it still sounds like respect in daylight, let it go. If it sounds like a bill wearing a compliment's clothing, start your file. Keep it dated. Keep it backed up twice. Because patience without proof is just suffering. But patience with proof is a loaded spring. The people who mistake your silence for weakness are telling you exactly how they plan to lose. Elena used to say Marcus fixes things quietly, and that's why she married him. The house is quiet now, but it's the good kind. There's a birdhouse on the porch rail, crooked perch, perfect. There's a lathe in a lobby with an old machinist's fingerprints deep in the metal. There's a 6-year-old asleep down the hall who will never remember any of this. And if Marcus does his job right, the boy will grow up thinking the most interesting thing about his dad is the waffles. That's the legacy, not the shares, not the wall. The version of yourself your kid copies when he thinks nobody's watching, tongue out sideways, measuring twice.